Okay, hello everyone. This is the Static Site Editor Design Product and UX Research Sync for November 2nd, 2020. I'll start by just recapping something that came up this morning with the product section. I posted this video to our settings and nav channel in Slack. It was a quick conversation or a quick stream of thought that Sid had and posted about how we might break up our settings and move away from having a singular settings icon on the left nav and break out the individual settings per feature within each subsection of the left nav. I brought it up not specifically because I think we should just do it, but because he highlighted one of the potential failure cases that I completely agree with, which is having settings in both places. So like if we can't universally move to a model like that or another model, and then we also have settings in the left hand and also have settings in context with these other things, and then if you don't know where to go to get to the settings, then it's going to get more confusing. So I think he brought up that point towards the end of having settings split across multiple places as a poor outcome, and I tend to agree. I don't think we necessarily need to move full steam on his concept, but I do think that moving forward with our research and solution validation on how we can consolidate and improve the settings experience and then surface them contextually alongside the feature where it's applicable. Whether that's through searching or this component idea that we've been talking about, or maybe the concept that Sid proposed, which is just breaking them all up and putting them in settings views across the features. So I figured I'd surface. I don't know, Michael, if you want to verbalize some of your feedback that you put in there or what.
That video got its rounds in the UX world as well. Some other designers also pinged me on it. I gave my feedback on it in the issue of contextual access to settings, which is like the issue that I have in place for just gathering thoughts around this approach of surfacing relevant settings in context of any specific feature. At the moment, my thoughts on it is more around centralizing the settings and then looking at ways to like bring those settings into context in the feature. I think it's really how we execute on that, or like the interaction pattern, that will be the thing, because there's a part of me that thinks that there's an issue of scattering it too much, and how we do that. It feels like there's two use cases. Like certain personas will be like, oh, I'm looking at this, I want this now, cool. But then there might be other personas, like a system admin who's like looking at it holistically, or things that have crossover dependencies. It's like, oh, I need to know to jump in this specific area to jump around. So that's this is something that I think conceptually, I think one settings and how we surface pathways into that is going to be how we solve this problem. There's probably a few patterns we could use. I haven't really dug into that yet, but I think, I think this segues into like setting standardization. It feels like one of the things I put in the design things is like settings right now is just a mixed bag of UI elements across the different areas. I think some of them are good, some of them are older patterns. I think we just need to audit and just say, boom, boom, boom. These ones are like using the older patterns to standardize and give some guidelines around things. And then let's run with that. It may not be like the definitive answer, but I think if we approach this from an iterate standpoint, I think there's already certain patterns that are common across our product and are falling pajamas to certain degrees. So let's run with that and then set that as a baseline and iterate on that. Oh, cool. Just by talking it out, I kind of like found my path for this week. So that's good.
No, that's great. Yeah. I think it moves into your first update. So I had another agenda item, but we started a little late, and I don't want to keep everybody but reiterating this. But as far as my top priorities for settings from a product standpoint, defining those UI patterns like you just mentioned, and your next point on the agenda is right up there. I think there's a couple rounds of solution validation for where we place these settings after we standardize the UI and how they're accessible through contextual modes or global settings. And then how do we search within the settings themselves? And I see your note about how that relates to the work that the global search, the advanced search group is working on. And I'm actually meeting with the PM tomorrow. So more on that later. I don't have an answer, but I will be looking into that for sure.
Mm.
So we can move right into the design section. Michael, I think you kind of started already to talk about the first one.
Yeah. So the first one is just auditing the different areas of settings, and then from there, standardizing, like picking out what's working, and then trying to address what's been raised as bugs or sus improvements, and then saying like, yes, this change will potentially solve that, and then putting that together towards solution validation. And the next one is more related to the static site editor, is this side panel improvements. One thing that is kind of bothering me at the moment with the static site editor is like, one of my designs has a modal, and like we have like this front matter panel that just opens from the side, and like this idea of standardization, I feel this is a good opportunity to either consolidate the patterns or make a good justification for one or the other. At the moment, the side panel that we use in front matter is like a very simple implementation of it. And we've seen other groups within GitLab kind of breaking away from the basic drawer implementation in pajamas and going a little bit more in detail and fidelity of things that could be placed in there, and potentially even making it wider. So with that in mind, it kind of opens up a possibility of improving that kind of flow to be like a better panel or better area to add all the things we want to add in there.
Yeah, so my comment on this is I'd love to see this implemented as part of our re-architecture when Enrique gets around to building out the UI. I don't know if you think it'd be useful, but we could, maybe you and I and him, maybe over an issue, just to keep it async, could discuss like, what does that implementation look like? Because we have some stray issues around like using a full width editor and moving stuff down to bottom bars, or like how we actually want to look in 6 or 8 months. And I think that would be a perfect time to be addressing it, in my opinion, but I'd want his take on that. So maybe we could, if not that you don't have enough on your plate, but if you wanted to take a stab at like a consolidated, what does it look like in 6 months? No, not implying new features or anything, but like assuming we have a tip tap based editor that has a floating formatting bar, and we have this new drawer treatment and maybe that bottom bar for the MR workflow, like what does that all look like together? And then we can see what can we pick apart, and how does that fit into the iterations of the re-architecture?
Sounds like a plan.
Cool.
Leave that to me.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, Catherine, over to you for some UX research.
Sure, and I will make it quick, but just to quickly follow up with Michael on your point about the audit, is there anything that would help you with that? Like, are you planning to kind of go through everything and take screenshots, or like, what's your approach for that?
Go through most of the pages, take screenshots, and then from there extracting existing patterns, and then saying like, we're going to replace this pattern with this pattern, replace this pattern, or keep this pattern, keep this pattern. That's kind of like the approach that I'm going to take. I'll be using your spreadsheet of like your existing audit to see what you already have, and kind of like the different areas you've highlighted in like kind of the settings structures, like what's in there. But I'm not addressing like the actual menu items as in like, oh, this should be here, this should be here. I think that's going to come through post your UX research. So I'll send this back to you.
Okay. Yeah. Now I just feel bad because I went through all of those and I probably should have just taken screenshots of all of those. But now you can see.
No, don't feel bad. I think the spreadsheet is going to be more helpful for me. Don't it's not wasted work at all.
Okay.
That's going to be more helpful for me to manipulate. So thank you for that.
And I think that'll also be helpful for the docs. There's just a lot of settings things going on. They're like reworking docs pages or something, and they're gonna like track down what they have docs for. But yeah, but for Michael, I apologize for the lack of screenshots because
don't apologize. Like with this stuff, it's like knowing what's in there is probably more important for like a restructuring thing. So
yeah, it's interesting because going through it, I mainly saw collapsing and expanding, but then there was like the integration and webhook pages where they just list things in a table or things like that. So you'll probably see a lot of them are the same, but then it'll randomly jump to something different, like in integrations and webhooks. But I'll see if I remember any of those to give you a hint or a heads up on where to go. But yeah. Okay. So what I was doing down here is just kind of giving you an overview of how I'm thinking about research, just general research for settings and nav, but also thinking about the OKR, because I know there's a couple benchmarking OKR related things. But how I think it'll work is that there are some things that I will work on kind of on my own, which is maybe more on the navigation side of things while you guys are working on the settings side of things. But with settings, there's this issue around the placement of settings that is also related to, I think it is the contextual issue around settings. So that's something that I want to start on from a problem validation standpoint, whereas the problem is already kind of there, and I want to just kind of consolidate everything that we've collected regarding the problem. So we can just say, here's what it is, here are the main areas that we need to focus on, and then also benchmarking. So to understand how users are performing on settings related tasks currently so that we can compare it with the proposal. And the same thing goes for navigation, where I believe there's the wayfinding issue. So that's around groups, navigating between groups and projects. And so on the opposite end of that, it'll be kind of an understanding of the current experience and measuring all of that. But what I wanted to kind of see is where, yeah, I guess I was trying to align with Eric's priorities. So would you say settings is kind of like the top priority of where to start with research? Or is there also the navigation being worked on kind of in parallel?
I would say settings is the more ripe area for research and the more understandable priority. I don't think one of them is like, I don't think I know enough to say one's has higher impact or more important, but I think there's a lot more thought that needs to go into navigation, and that's where I think you probably have the harder job, because you're going to have to probably do research on both streams in parallel so that we can pick up the work on settings first, but not lag too far behind on navigation, if that makes sense. But yes, unlocking all of that stuff for settings is probably the top priority, because benchmarking, I'm really glad you said that. I think that's like super important for defining success criteria for the settings experience. And then in general, the themes you have for navigation are in line with, what we've talked about. But those, I imagine, will take a little longer, and there's a little more consolidation of existing research that needs to happen. So I expect we will be working on settings more near term and with more concrete issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I remember there's like a 4 solution validation goal thing in the OKR. So I would just say, Michael, as you create them, or as you create the issue that you might put through solution validation, if you could just like ping me in them so that I'm aware that this might be the next theme, that would be helpful for me. But yeah, other than that, I will leave this point for the next time because I have a feeling the last point might change based off of the earlier information. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
the gist of it is I don't think there's any concrete plans for any problem or solution validation for the static site editor. Our immediate focus is going to be executing the re-architecture based on TipTap and Prose Mirror. And having talked with Enrique about that, there are some areas that we could potentially work in parallel with multiple engineers, but we're looking at probably 5 milestones of work to get feature parity with the current static site editor. There might be opportunities to bring some of that work in earlier and actually contribute it to other groups earlier within like the 3 milestone time frame, but we're probably not going to be doing a lot of feature work over the next 2 quarters for the static site editor. It'll be focused on getting that new foundation in place and building something that's more extensible.
All right, sounds good.
Cool. Well, I think that's the end of the agenda. So unless there's anything else, thank you, as always, for a great discussion.
That's it. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.